Somebody is fired for being too ethical. It sounds like a paradox, right? Or a company's profits soar, but its reputation tanks. These aren't just headlines. They're real-world scenarios that reveal the deep, often uncomfortable truth. Business decisions aren't made in a vacuum. They echo. They reverberate. Every choice a company makes has ripple effects, touching employees, customers, communities, and the bottom line. The question isn't whether business affects society, but how consciously and ethically it chooses to do so. And James, in our final conversation for this unit, we're not just looking at the what of diversity and inclusion, but the how. We've talked about metrics, ethics, leadership, but what does it actually look like when an organization truly gets it right? How do we move from impressive statements to measurable, meaningful impact? That's precisely the pivot, William. We've laid the theoretical groundwork, explored the ethical imperative, and even touched on the measurement tools. Now, the natural next step is to examine what successful diversity management actually looks like in practice. It's one thing to say we value diversity, another entirely to build an organization where diversity thrives and drives performance. And I think many organizations, perhaps with the best intentions, stumble right at the start. They see diversity as a numbers game. We have X% women, or Y nationalities represented. Those statistics are often presented with a sense of accomplishment. Exactly. And while representation is a foundational element, it's merely the first step. The World Economic Forum, through its DEI Lighthouse program, really highlighted this distinction. They weren't looking for companies that could just boast about their demographic makeup. They sought out organizations that could demonstrate measurable improvements in both inclusion and business performance. That's a crucial difference. So it's not just about getting people in the door, but what happens once they're there. Are they staying? Are they advancing? Are they feeling valued? It sounds like the WEF was looking for proof of inclusion, not just presence. Precisely. Consider the questions they might ask. How many of those women occupy leadership positions? Do employees from different backgrounds report the same level of job satisfaction? Are they remaining with the organization long enough to build successful careers? These questions move beyond mere representation to genuine belonging and opportunity. Representation without inclusion often leads to high turnover among diverse groups, effectively negating any initial gains. That makes sense. It highlights that the goal isn't just a diverse headcount, but a workplace where that diversity translates into meaningful opportunities and ultimately better organizational outcomes. It sounds like they were seeking organizations that weren't just talking the talk, but walking the walk, with data to back it up. Absolutely. The distinction is paramount. Many companies issue diversity statements, some quite eloquently, but the Lighthouse program's focus was on organizations that could prove their initiatives actually worked, that they resulted in tangible, positive shifts, not just internal sentiment, but also external business impact. It's about accountability. So what did these successful organizations have in common, James? What were the key characteristics that set them apart from those just, as you say, talking the talk? The WEF identified two primary common characteristics, and they're quite fundamental. First, these organizations invested significant time and resources in understanding the real causes of inequality within their own specific contexts. They didn't assume they knew the problem. They gathered evidence. So not just a blanket solution, but a diagnosis tailored to their own symptoms. Exactly. For instance, if women were underrepresented in leadership, they wouldn't just launch a general mentorship program. They'd investigate, was it recruitment bias, outdated promotion policies, lack of work-life balance support, insufficient mentorship opportunities, or uptake? Only after identifying the root causes did they begin designing targeted solutions. This is a crucial management lesson. Good leaders solve problems based on evidence, not assumptions. That's a very proactive and analytical approach. It suggests a commitment to understanding the nuances of their own internal systems rather than just adopting industry best practices blindly. And the second characteristic? The second characteristic is closely linked. They clearly defined what success looked like. They didn't settle for vague aspirations like, we want to become more inclusive. Instead, they established measurable objectives. We've talked about metrics before, but here it's about tying those metrics directly to clear goals. Can you give some examples of those measurable objectives? Certainly. They'd aim to increase female leadership representation by a specific percentage, say 15% within 3 years, or improve employee engagement survey results for underrepresented groups by a set number of points, reduce turnover among specific diverse cohorts, increase participation in leadership development programs for minority employees. These aren't just feel-good metrics, they're concrete, quantifiable targets that allowed organizations to evaluate progress over time and adjust their strategies accordingly. This whole approach, from identifying root causes to setting measurable objectives, suggests a very intentional and strategic integration of DEI into the core business operations. It's not an add-on, it's fundamental. It is, and this brings us to what is perhaps the strongest lesson from the WEF's findings and from our readings this week. Diversity cannot succeed without genuine, visible, and sustained leadership commitment. I can imagine 2 scenarios here. In one, the CEO champions diversity, talks about it in town halls, resources are allocated, managers are held accountable. In the other, the CEO announces a diversity initiative once, then delegates it entirely to HR, and it sort of disappears. Exactly. And which scenario do you think is more likely to succeed? The answer is obvious. Employees watch what leaders do, not just what they say. Leadership behavior communicates organizational priorities far more effectively than any corporate slogan ever will. When leaders consistently demonstrate fairness, transparency, respect, and accountability, those values begin to permeate the entire organization. So culture really does spread from the top down. It's not enough to set up an HR department for DEI. The C-suite needs to own it. Absolutely. As Ellen Gruden-Baller explained, the organizations achieving the greatest success treated diversity, equity, and inclusion as leadership responsibilities, fully integrated into the overall business strategy rather than isolated HR initiatives. This means it's on the agenda for board meetings, it influences investment decisions, and it's tied to performance reviews for all senior managers. That's a powerful point. It really shifts DEI from being a nice-to-have to a must-have strategic imperative. So at the core of this, we're seeing that genuine organizational change in diversity and inclusion hinges on a data-driven root cause approach backed by explicit, measurable goals and, critically, unwavering commitment from the very top. It's about making it a core part of how the business operates, not a separate project. This takes us beyond just numbers to a much deeper, more embedded level of engagement. Now, James, let's circle back to something we discussed early on, the idea that diversity isn't just about ethics or fairness, but also a strategic advantage. Specifically, how does it strengthen innovation? This is where the direct business case for diversity really shines. Imagine gathering 10 people who all share identical backgrounds, similar education, similar experiences to solve a complex business problem. Now, contrast that with a group of 10 people from completely different educational experiences, cultures, professional backgrounds, and perspectives. Intuitively, I'd say the second group is more likely to generate innovative solutions, and intuition aligns with research here. The second group almost invariably generates a wider range of ideas and more creative, robust solutions. Why? Because different experiences produce different ways of thinking, different lenses through which to view a problem. One employee might immediately recognize a nuanced customer need that another misses. Someone else understands a specific technological constraint or opportunity. Another identifies financial risks, while a fourth might focus on environmental sustainability or regulatory hurdles. So it's about a broader toolkit of perspectives, essentially. Precisely. Together, those diverse perspectives lead to stronger decisions and more innovative solutions than any single individual or homogeneous group could develop alone. This is why diversity has become such a critical competitive advantage in today's interconnected economy. Organizations serving global customers desperately need employees who understand those global customers in all their complexity. Businesses operating internationally need leaders capable of navigating cultural differences with genuine insight, not just superficial understanding. It goes beyond just avoiding cultural missteps, doesn't it? It's about actively leveraging those different cultural understandings to find new market opportunities or tailor products more effectively. Absolutely. It transforms potential challenges into strategic assets. When you have a truly diverse workforce, it's like having multiple antennae constantly scanning the environment, picking up different signals. This translates into better market intelligence, more creative product development, and more resilient business models. The innovation isn't just a happy byproduct, it's a direct result of the cognitive diversity fostered by a truly inclusive environment. That's a very compelling case for diversity as a strategic driver. But it's not just about internal innovation, is it? Our readings also touched on broader societal impacts, particularly women's economic empowerment. Yes, another important reading this week came from UN Women, which brought a crucial macro perspective. It highlighted that despite significant global progress, women still face pervasive barriers that limit their full economic participation. These aren't just minor hurdles, they're systemic. Like what kind of barriers? They include unequal access to leadership opportunities, which we just discussed, wage inequality, the persistent gender pay gap, and limited access to critical resources like land, loans, and financial services. Crucially, there's also the greater, often unrecognized responsibility for unpaid care work, which disproportionately falls on women, limiting their career progression. And finally, reduced participation in economic decision-making at all levels. I can hear some listeners asking, why should businesses concern themselves with these broader social issues? Isn't that the government's job or NGOs? That's a very valid question, and it connects directly to everything we've studied in this course. Businesses do not exist in a vacuum separate from society. They recruit employees from society, they sell products and services to society. They depend entirely on society for customers, suppliers, infrastructure, and talent. If large sections of society cannot fully participate economically, businesses lose out dramatically because they lose access to talent and purchasing power. Precisely, they lose access to valuable talent, innovative ideas, and significant purchasing power. Supporting economic inclusion, therefore, isn't just altruism. It benefits both society and business in very tangible ways. The UN Women reading provided some encouraging examples of this in action, which is important to see. Like what? In Kenya, public procurement policies were updated to intentionally increase opportunities for women-owned businesses. This isn't just about fairness. It injects capital into an underserved sector and stimulates local economies. In Morocco, women farmers received support to adopt more profitable agricultural practices, leading to increased yields and financial independence. Globally, over 1,000 CEOs have signed the Women's Empowerment Principles, demonstrating a growing recognition that gender equality contributes to stronger organizational performance. These are not just feel-good stories, then. They show concrete economic benefits derived from targeted diversity and inclusion efforts. It sounds like a strong rebuttal to anyone who still thinks DEI is separate from the business's core mission. Absolutely. These examples remind us that diversity initiatives can create measurable improvements far beyond individual organizations, impacting entire economies. When we talk about these broader societal issues, it's not simply an ethical plea. It's a recognition that business sustainability is deeply intertwined with societal well-being and equitable participation. Organizations that genuinely embrace DEI recognize this symbiotic relationship, understanding that their long-term success is enhanced, not hindered, by striving for a more equitable world. This is why supporting women's economic empowerment becomes not just a social good, but a strategic business imperative. It taps into previously underutilized potential, expanding markets, fostering innovation, and building stronger communities, which in turn creates a more robust operating environment for businesses themselves. That's a powerful connection, James. And speaking of common misconceptions, there's one I hear frequently when diversity is discussed: the idea that it means lowering standards. How do we address that? It's a misunderstanding that often crops up, and it's important to confront it directly. The core message of this unit and of successful diversity management is emphatically not about lowering standards. On the contrary, successful organizations maintain high expectations. So it's not about making it easier, it's about making it fair. Precisely. They remove unnecessary barriers that prevent qualified individuals from competing fairly in the first place. Think of it this way. Imagine organizing a race where some runners begin 10 meters behind the starting line because of factors entirely unrelated to their athletic ability or preparation. The competition isn't fair. Creating equal starting opportunities doesn't guarantee identical outcomes. People still succeed through talent, effort, preparation, and performance. But everyone deserves the opportunity to compete fairly, to reach the true starting line. That's a very clear analogy. It reframes the conversation from who gets in to who gets a fair shot at getting in. Exactly. The principle behind inclusive organizations is about maximizing the talent pool, not diluting it. It's about recognizing that talent is distributed across all demographics, but opportunity hasn't always been. So when an organization actively seeks diverse candidates, it's not settling for less qualified individuals, it's proactively seeking out equally or more qualified individuals from pools they might have traditionally overlooked due to unconscious bias, old networks, or systemic barriers. So the rigorous hiring process, the performance evaluations, those standards remain. But the pathways to get to that process, or to succeed within it, are made more equitable. Precisely. In fact, many studies show that organizations with strong DEI practices often have higher standards for hiring and performance, precisely because they're casting a wider net and thus have a larger pool of exceptional talent to choose from. They're not compromising on quality, they're optimizing for it by ensuring their processes are equitable and merit-based, allowing the best talent, regardless of background, to rise. That really puts the better business in better business, not lower standards. It clarifies that the goal isn't just about social justice, but about organizational excellence by tapping into the full spectrum of human potential, which then becomes a powerful competitive advantage. Now, James, stepping back a bit, one of the things I've really appreciated about this course is how each unit builds on the previous one. How does this final deep dive into diversity and inclusion connect to the broader themes we've explored throughout the entire business and society course? It's a fantastic question, William, and it's where the true power of diversity management as a holistic concept emerges. Think back to stakeholder theory, which we covered early on. Employees are undeniably one of an organization's most critical stakeholder groups. Managing diversity well is a direct demonstration of respect and responsibility towards this vital group, ensuring their well-being and engagement. So, it's acknowledging their inherent value and their stake in the company's success. Exactly. Then we examined business ethics. Fair treatment, equal opportunity, honesty, respect, and accountability are not just buzzwords. They are fundamental ethical principles that underpin effective diversity management. You cannot claim to be an ethical organization if you are not striving for equity and inclusion internally. And corporate social responsibility, or CSR, comes to mind as well. Absolutely. Creating equitable and inclusive workplaces represents one of the most practical and impactful expressions of social responsibility. It's not just about philanthropy or external community projects, it's about how an organization treats its own people, which is arguably its most direct and significant social impact. And then, sustainability. I imagine sustainability isn't just environmental, it's about the longevity and health of the business itself. Precisely. Organizations cannot achieve long-term sustainability if they fail to attract, develop, and retain talented people from diverse backgrounds. In a rapidly changing global economy, talent is the ultimate renewable resource. Limiting your access to that talent pool is a recipe for long-term decline. So diversity management isn't an isolated topic or a tangential HR issue. It is the practical application of ethical leadership, sound stakeholder management, genuine corporate responsibility, and a fundamental pillar of sustainable business strategy. That really ties everything together. It means DEI isn't a separate initiative, but an integral part of what makes a business successful and responsible in the long run. It's not just about doing good, it's about doing good business. It's a core strategic element for any organization aiming for sustained success in a complex world. The threads of ethics, stakeholder engagement, CSR, and long-term viability all converge, making DEI an indispensable component of modern business strategy. James, as we wrap up this conversation, could you give us a concise summary of the most important ideas listeners should take away from our discussion on diversity and inclusion? Certainly, William. Let's distill it down to 5 key points. First, remember the distinction between diversity and inclusion. Diversity means having people from different backgrounds within an organization. Inclusion means creating an environment where every employee feels respected, valued, and able to contribute fully. And it's the inclusion part that makes diversity truly impactful. Absolutely. Second, diversity is both an ethical responsibility and a shrewd business strategy. Ethically, Organizations have a duty to provide fair treatment and equal opportunity. Strategically, diverse organizations consistently benefit from improved innovation, better decision-making, higher employee engagement, and ultimately, stronger organizational performance. What about measurement? That's the third point. What gets measured gets managed. Organizations must use robust diversity metrics to evaluate representation, engagement, promotion rates, retention across diverse groups, leadership diversity, and the overall sense of inclusion. Without diligent measurement, genuine improvement becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And related to this is the fourth point, the balanced scorecard. It helps organizations translate their diversity initiatives into measurable organizational objectives, ensuring DEI contributes tangibly to the overall business strategy rather than remaining a symbolic, isolated initiative. And the role of leadership, which you stress so much. Crucial. That's our fifth point. Leadership determines organizational culture. Inclusive workplaces don't magically appear. They develop because leaders consistently model fairness, accountability, transparency, and respect. Their actions, not just their words, set the tone for the entire organization. So, to tie it all together, what's the one overarching idea you'd want our listeners to remember from this entire unit? The single idea that captures the essence of this unit is this: managing diversity is ultimately about helping people perform at their best. When organizations actively work to remove unnecessary barriers, when they genuinely respect differences, encourage participation, and create authentic opportunities for everyone to contribute their unique talents, employees thrive. And when employees thrive, the organization thrives. And perhaps most importantly, when organizations thrive ethically and inclusively, society benefits as a whole. That's a very powerful and optimistic note to end on, James. It truly reframes diversity from a challenge into a fundamental driver of success at every level. It is, William. It's about unlocking human potential and what could be a stronger foundation for any organization. Thank you, James, for guiding us through this incredibly insightful discussion on diversity and inclusion. Our source material for this conversation was largely drawn from the World Economic Forum's DEI Lighthouse Program Insights, specifically the work of Ellengroot and Baller, as well as crucial perspectives from UN Women. These resources really helped frame the practical application of these principles. My pleasure, William. It's a topic that demands continuous exploration and action. If this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might also find value in understanding how diversity isn't just about numbers, but about building stronger, more ethical, and innovative organizations.